Welcome to the Unstressed Exec, the podcast where we dive deep into the real conversations that help you lead, love, and live with greater clarity, courage, and calm. I'm your host, Dr. George Vergolias, executive coach and clinical forensic psychologist, and I help high-achieving professionals navigate life transitions, resolve conflict with confidence, and build unshakable psychological resilience. So if you're ready to lead with purpose, master conflict with grace, and become more emotionally agile under pressure, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Welcome back to episode number 9 of the Unstressed Exec. I'm Dr. George Vergolias, executive and resilience coach, forensic psychologist, and someone who has spent 2 decades helping high performers break through invisible ceilings. If you've been with me through the Men's Mental Health series, thank you for your attention, your awareness, and by listening, your advocacy. That is greatly appreciated, and the men in your life need it. We explored how silence, stigma, and systemic failure are costing men their lives and what we can do about it. But today's conversation applies to everyone, especially high achievers, because this week we're talking about something I see holding back the most successful, disciplined, and driven clients that I coach with and work with every day, and that is psychological armor. You know what I'm talking about. It's that part of you that's polished, controlled, focused, high-performing, untouchable. It's the reason you excel under pressure. It's also the reason you might struggle in your closest relationships. And the problem there is because you can't seem to turn it off when you need to. Why healing feels like a foreign language. And so today's question is this: how do you stay strong without staying closed off to the people around you and closed off to new experiences? It's the difficulty of staying in a growth mindset. It's the difficulty of remaining vulnerable, but still remaining strong. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Thank you for joining me. Let's dive in. So I'm going to start by first unpacking what is psychological armor. Psychological armor, first, is not a diagnosis. I am a clinical and forensic psychologist of 25 years. I will tell you it is not a diagnosis of any kind. It's really a defense. It is a way of describing cognitive, emotional, and psychological defense mechanisms that people engage in. It's what you develop when life teaches you that being open is dangerous or that your worth is conditional. It often shows up in the following ways. You avoid showing emotion, especially around others. You intellectualize pain instead of feeling it. You take care of everyone first, but you never ask for help. And you're most comfortable in doing, but not being. So silence, dead time, unscheduled time is a threat to you, because the threat is that gives a chance for these unresolved emotions to bubble up and break through the armor. Because the armor is not a solid piece of Teflon. Psychological armor is more like chainmail, the old middle age chainmail. It is tough. It will defend against attacks for sure. But if you threw hot oil at that chainmail or hot water, it would penetrate through the chainmail. It is permeable. So is our psychological armor. So that's one way to think about it. For many high performers, this armor doesn't begin as adults. It begins in childhood. It begins with the patterns and the things that we were told or not told about how to manage difficult emotions and how to sit with difficult feelings. Maybe you had to grow up fast. Maybe you only got attention for certain physical achievements like sports or other things. Maybe vulnerability was mocked or punished in the environment you grew up in. If any of these things were in place, what you learned was that to be safe, I have to be impressive. I have to be unbreakable. I have to be in control. And honestly, it worked, because here you are. And that armor got you here. It protected you. It helped you build and lead and perform and provide. But here's the truth that I've seen over and over again working with C-suite executives, high achievers of both genders. And it's this: the very strengths that build empires can quietly destroy intimacy, authenticity, and inner peace. So let's talk about the illusion of safety, because this is such a big component when we talk about the psychological armor that we're addressing. One way to think of this is, let's first open with what armor costs. What is the cost of having this psychological armor? You may look successful on paper, for example, but inside, something else is going on. You might feel emotionally isolated, chronically anxious, or deeply misunderstood. Here's the metaphor that I often use. You can't hug someone in a suit of armor. It's impossible. You could put your arms around them. You could try to embrace the armor, but you're not really making a human to human connection. It keeps people at a distance, even when you're longing for certain types of closeness. And this really becomes a paradox. The armor that you built to feel safe is now the exact thing that's keeping you from feeling anything at all. And it's also keeping you from engaging most intentionally and deeply in the relationships in your life. And when those start to go south and leave and break up and have all kinds of disrepair, what you then find is that the armor wasn't keeping you safe at all. It was keeping you isolated. And that is a big problem. Another way I like to think of psychological armor is, I think about skin, right? Different animals have different levels of toughness of skin. The human adult skin is not all that tough in the animal kingdom. Compare that to a turtle's shell or to an armadillo's skin. Human skin isn't all that tough. You take a knife of reasonable sharpness with reasonable amount of force, and you can cut through that skin. Now, a baby's skin is even softer than an adult's skin. And if you have an aging person, an elderly person that's been in the sun for years and years and years, they might have even more leathered or tough skin in some context, right? But even if you take that armadillo and you take a knife that is sharp enough and you put enough force into it, you will be able to make an impact, a dent, if you will, in that skin, of that extremely tough skin. So all of us have different psychological skin. I'm back to the metaphor now. We all have different levels of psychological toughness. Some of it might be born out of narcissism, so it's not a real toughness. It's more of a fabricated toughness that is part of the armor that we're wearing. Others of us really are psychologically well developed. We've done a lot of inner work, and we really have grit and tenacity, and we essentially have a tough psychological skin. But if you take a trauma is the metaphor for a knife, and you inflict a serious or severe trauma for a prolonged period of time, even on the toughest psychological person in the world, they too will break down, right? So we all have a little degree of armor. We all have a bit of a toughness to our skin. Some days it's more developed than others. And over time, we can develop that grit and that toughness better. But the bottom line is, there will be a stressor, there will be a trauma that is severe enough and hard enough and applied long enough that it will break through that skin and break through that armor. So it really is an illusion of safety when we think of psychological armor. It helps in the short term, maybe in the moderate term, but in the long term, if we can't put that armor down, we are really going to find ourselves disconnected to the people in our life that we most want to be connected to. So then a flip side of that is understanding what emotional availability is and what it is not. So let's be clear. Emotional availability doesn't mean crying on command or turning into someone that you're not. It's not an inauthentic way of being in the world. We're not talking about that. And it's not fakeness at any level. What it really means, what emotional availability really means, is being present when you feel discomfort. So not numbing it, not performing your way through it or pretending your way through it, and not running away. Being fully present and feeling the discomfort, acknowledging it, letting it move through your body. Second, it's allowing others to see more than your curated strengths, right? I love social media, right? I'm going to post this podcast on my TikTok and my Instagram and my Facebook and my YouTube channels, right? I've got all the things. I've got all the channels. And I would love it if you could go over there and give me a follow. So I'm going to do a little shameless plug here in the middle of the podcast. And I am at the Unstressed Exec on all of those platforms. But what I I mean, I love social media and I love the insights and the community and the strengths and just little facts I didn't know about seemingly benign things. I love that about social media. And I love how it's brought people together. But what I really don't like is the fact that every day we are watching people's highlight reels on social media when we are living in our own personal B roll. We are living in our own personal shit show of all the outtakes and all the fumbles and all the bloopers. And we end up comparing what we're living in ourselves, the B roll, the bloopers, the outtakes of our life with the perfectly curated A game, right? Prime time video we see on social media. And as a result, we end up feeling down about ourselves. So that's what I don't like about social media. So this second point that I just said, allowing others to see more than your curated strengths, means letting them see behind the camera, letting them see your vulnerability, letting them see those parts of you that are not perfect, that are not well tuned, that are not well curated. And then the third thing about emotional availability, it's being able to say, I'm not okay. Or, man, that really messed me up. That really impacted me. And doing these things, saying these things without a sense of shame, without a sense of that shows weakness, without a sense that this should be shameful or I should feel bad or awkward admitting this. Because there's nothing wrong with admitting that. There's a great cartoon I saw. I believe it was Calvin and Hobbes, and it was years ago. And Calvin is walking along and he asks Hobbes, it might be the other way around, but it doesn't matter for the sake of the story. Calvin asks Hobbes, what is the most courageous word in the human language? And Hobbes says back to him, the word is help. When you say help, it is a fucking act of courage because you are admitting that I don't have it all sorted out. I don't have all the answers. And by saying help, you're literally acknowledging that you're vulnerable. You're acknowledging you need assistance, and you're putting that power in the other person to step in and give you a hand. You're not powerlessness. I mean, you're not helpless. You're not powerless, but you really are making a courageous act by asking for help. So along those lines, emotional availability is not weakness. Actually, it's the opposite. It's relational strength. And it's a skill, one that can be practiced, strengthened, and it can be integrated into your leadership, into your love life, into your friendships. It can be integrated even into your business planning, right? Your business growth. It's something that can be integrated into every aspect of your life, every domain. So when we think about emotional ability and we talk about psychological armor and the illusion of safety, one of the things we have to talk about is what I call the high achievers trap. So there's a number of things that high achievers, by their very nature, fall into. There's a great, it's kind of a half joke and it's kind of a little bit of a parable where there's a frog and there's a scorpion and they're on one side of the river. And they both are saying, boy, I'd really like to get over to the other side of the river. And the frog says, well, it's a pretty busy river and I can navigate and swim. The problem is I can't really see where I'm swimming. And because the river's pretty fast, it's going to dash me up against the rocks and I can't really see above water to where the rocks are. And so the scorpion says, well, I'll tell you what, let me hop on your back and I will guide you. I can't swim, so I need you to carry me across the river, but I then can be above the water and I can tell you where the rocks are. And I can tell you to go left, go right, go straight. And the frog says, well, it sounds like a good idea, but you're a scorpion. You're going to sting me and then I'm going to die. And the scorpion says, why would I do that? If I sting you, we're both going to die because we're going to be in the middle of the river and I'm going to drown because I can't swim. And they make their way across, and about halfway across the river, sure enough, the scorpion stings the frog. And they both go down and they both drown. And as they're going down, the frog says, but why? Why did you do this? We're both going to die now. And the scorpion says, it's my nature. It's my nature. Now, again, kind of a silly little parable story, but what I like about that is that at some level, we each in our growth trajectory have to acknowledge what is our nature. And if you are a high achiever and you know who you are, you're type A, you're driven, even if you haven't achieved the heights you want to get to, you're that hard worker, you're focused, you're determined, you're intentional. there are some significant traps that by your nature, kind of like the scorpion, you might fall into. So if this is resonating, you might recognize some of these traps. The first one is over identifying with competence. You lead with skill and logic, but you tend to struggle with softness or uncertainty. I often think that one way of looking at people in the world, especially as a business leader and an entrepreneur and a chief clinical officer for an international company, as well as having a thriving executive leadership coaching practice, I often find one way you can dichotomize people or put them on a continuum is there's people on one side, far on one side, that they're overconfident. They absolutely think they could slay everything that comes their way. And in some ways, they might be really good, but they have a hard time learning and growing because they already think they have all the answers. And then if you go way to the other side, you've got somebody that actually might be very competent, but they tend to assume they don't know it as much as they know, or they assume they don't know enough to offer value. And somewhere in between is a healthy balance. And I think everyone falls somewhere on that continuum, right? So those high achievers who over identify with competence, they tend to lead with their skill and their logic and their persuasive speech because that's what they can fall back on. And with that comes this high level of confidence. And to some degree, it's born of actual success, and some degree, it may be fabricated. The difficulty is when they are presented with situations where they need to have emotional softness, psychological connectedness, or just uncertainty, the ability to say, I don't have the answers, but we're going to find out together. They struggle with that because they can't turn off that performative sense of competence, which they're over identifying with. So keep that in mind if you're one of these people. The second category of high achiever traps is confusing control with safety. It's when you think having control means that I'm safe psychologically or emotionally. So you micromanage your emotion like it's a project plan, or you're a project manager. Everything's articulated, everything's planned, everything is forewarned, everything is scripted out. And so the ability to have organic, spontaneous emotion that is appropriate to the moment is something that you might struggle with. Because again, these are patterns that we often develop as children, and your mind having that control means you are safe, but it doesn't always turn out that way. The third category, defaulting to a fix-it mode. You analyze everything instead of empathizing, especially in conflict. So one thing I do with my partner, with my girlfriend of several years now, amazing. She's an amazing real estate baller. She is motivated. She is emotionally intelligent. Not to mention, of course, for me, she's stunningly beautiful. But we will get into some things, or we'll be navigating some conflicts or some difficulties. And I will often say to her, do you need support or solutions? And I'll ask her, support or solutions? Do you need me just to listen right now? I could just listen. I could just hear you. I can empathize. I could turn off my analysis. And by the way, men, holy shit, we always go to solving the problem. That is our default mode. We go to let me solve it. I'm the man. Let me fix it. Let me protect. Let me provide. And that's not a bad thing. Society wouldn't be what it is if for the last 50,000 years, men didn't do that. But it can have its downside because sometimes the solution isn't the answer. So I will ask my girlfriend, support or solutions? When she says solutions, then hell, it's on. I'm putting on my analytical cap, and we are going to work at solutions. And now I'm going to be in full coaching mode, helping solve problems, get clarity, and move towards resolution. The problem for high achievers is we default to this fix-it mode all the time, and we try to solve all our problems through analyzing, right? Instead of empathizing, especially when we're in conflict. And that isn't always in fact, I would say it differently. That mostly is not the best option. Because in conflict, the first thing we have to solve is the emotional repair and the reconnection of the relationship. And only then do you actually have an audience that you then can begin to move towards finding mutual solutions. So the fourth trap that high achievers fall into is avoiding what can't be optimized. Now, this is an interesting one. I'm going to say it again, avoiding what can't be optimized. And the reality is emotions don't have KPIs. They're messy. And that's terrifying. They don't have clear indicators. They merge, they come and they go and they merge, right? Different emotions will merge into one emotion and then they will separate out again in response to different events or different triggers. And some are more present in our life and some trigger crap that we haven't dealt with in 20 years. But if you're a high achiever, you have optimized your life. You've optimized your routines. You've optimized your systems to push for maximum effect. And emotions just don't, unfortunately, they don't work that way. So here's what I want you to hear. Your brain is fucking brilliant. It is brilliant. But your healing is in your body and your heart. And although they are brilliant in their own way, they are not brilliant the way your brain is brilliant. And they experience things at their own cadence and their own pace. So now that we've talked about what psychological armor is, we've talked about the illusion of safety, we've talked about what is emotional availability, and then we just went through 4 common traps if you are a high achiever. Let's move on to the meat. And the meat is, okay, what the hell do we do about this? How do we soften the armor in a way that still keeps us safe, still keeps us in control, and still keeps us in a phase of being able to support the goals and the outcomes of our life and the people around us that care about us the most and depend on us the most? So how do we loosen the armor without really losing ourselves? That's the fundamental question. Here are 5 practices that have helped my clients rewire emotional availability over the past 10 years. First is you have to name your defenses, right? We have to know where we are. If we don't know where we are, we cannot possibly know where we're going. So start with awareness. Notice when you shut down, when you deflect, when you distract, or when you intellectualize. Language it. Put it into verbiage. This is me protecting myself right now. Own it. I have this little technique I do. So I still wake up almost every day with negative thoughts. And often those negative thoughts would kind of take off. It's part of my ADHD. They'll kind of take off and I'll end up having, while I'm brushing my teeth in the morning, an entire dialogue anticipating some conflict or some argument with a client or a boss or a coworker that hasn't even occurred. But in my head, I'm already planning a whole series of rebuttals back and forth to some negative interaction that hasn't even existed yet. And so what I started doing to help name my defenses is I named that part of my brain that brings the negative thoughts. I gave the name Francis. And for those of you that are old enough, it's directly from the movie Stripes with Bill Murray. There's a character in that movie that's just really annoying. He's just an annoying character. He's kind of a pain in the ass. And at one point, Bill Murray says, "Easy, Francis," and he kind of tells him to shut the hell up. So what I do is when I recognize I'm having these negative thoughts or these defenses, I'm shutting down. I'm deflecting. I'm getting into a negative thought loop. I'm giving myself negative messages. I'm calling myself an idiot. I'm calling myself stupid, whatever it may be. I'm telling myself you'll never be successful launching your course or writing that book. I name the part of my brain that that's coming from, and I named it Francis. And so what I'll do is I'll say, "Shut the hell up, Francis. I don't got time for your shit today." I personify it. I categorize it. But by doing it, I'm giving it kind of a name, even a personality. But it allows me then to kind of capture it or encapsulate it and put it aside. So number 1, name your defenses. Number 2, practice micro vulnerability. What do we mean by there? Let me tell you what I don't mean by micro vulnerability. Full on vulnerability, and I would even maybe say too much vulnerability, is you go into a board meeting or you go into a client meeting or even a team meeting and you open up with, "My dog is sick and I think they have cancer," and you immediately start bawling in the middle of the meeting. Or some other way where you just express way too much emotionality and vulnerability that may not be appropriate at the moment. Now, if that organically comes out of you spontaneously, okay, these things happen. But I wouldn't necessarily plan that because there is a time and a place for different levels of emotional expression and vulnerability. But what is micro vulnerability? It's admitting that we don't have all the answers. It's admitting that we are not totally in control, but doing it in smaller doses. So think of these 3 examples. Simply saying, "I don't know." I'm a chief clinical officer. People come to me every day. My team, people outside of our business, our clientele, We have a number of very high level clientele, kinds of concierge clientele. We have a number of people, I'm coaching executives that come to me, and they will often come to me for answers. That's part of what I provide. That's part of my value. I need the ability to say, that is a great question, and I don't know. But I'll tell you what, I'm going to find out, or I'm going to try to get clarity to bring some awareness to that question. The second one for micro vulnerability is that really affected me. You're just admitting to someone, you're not breaking down, you're not letting someone get you fully defensive. You're acknowledging what you said really affected me. And it might be it affected me, meaning you're being a jerk, or it might just be a very touching story. And I'm simply admitting, boy, that was a very moving story. That moved me. Third category is I need some help today, or I need support today. Earlier, I said the most courageous word in the English language is help. Another way you could simply show micro vulnerability is, hey, I'm at my wit's end. I need a little help today. These are reps at the emotional gym. Think about it. These are repetitions at your emotional gym. And just like a muscle, practicing micro vulnerability, practicing naming your defenses is going to grow over time if you give more attention to it. The things that grow in our mind are the things that we water. They're the things that we give attention to. You can grow these things and you can grow these capacities. The third thing to do around practicing softening the armor is replace judgment with curiosity. So instead of saying the question, why do I always mess this up? Try reframing that to what's coming up for me right now? What is bubbling up? What is this feeling I'm having? Where's it coming from? And how does it serve me? Another way to think of this is replacing judgment with curiosity is taking challenges or setbacks and reframing them as opportunities for learning and growth. So again, another way to think of it is, boy, I'm not really good at presenting. Instead of saying I'm not really good at presenting to live audiences, say, I'm not very good at presenting to live audiences yet. That word yet is so powerful because it opens up a whole new opportunity. The minute you put yet at the back end of that sentence, I'm not very good at presenting to live audiences yet, but I'm going to learn. I'm going to watch more TED Talks. I'm going to join Toastmasters. I'm going to take that online course on public speaking, so on and so on and so on. Now I've opened up to an opportunity where I can grow, and it is theoretically limitless. So replace judgment with curiosity is the third recommendation. What's the fourth? Invite safe mirrors. What do I mean by that? Mirrors. Connect with people who can hold space for your process, but not rush to fix or make it all about them. Another way to say this is you need to find your tribe. Your tribe creates your vibe. And yes, the vibe that you give off will shape your tribe. They've done studies that have been amazing. And what they did is they looked at the career growth over the course of several years of people. And the main factor they were looking at is who did you work next to? Who was in the cubicle next to your left and to your right? And what they found, aside from schooling and aside from prior experience and aside from self-perceived or self-endorsed drive, and aside from even skill set, what they found is one of the biggest predictors of your success is literally who you sat next to your left and to your right. Were they driven? Were they motivated? Were they organized? Did they have a learning and growth mindset as opposed to a fixed mindset? That's so powerful. Your environment, it's such a powerful indicator in terms of how it shapes the way we think. My father used to say, if you lay down with dogs, you're going to get fleas. And listen, we love dogs, but nothing against dogs. But what he means is if you're associating, if your tribe is just getting high every night, taking gummies, smoking pot, drinking, going to the bars, and that's fine if you do some of that, right? We need outlets. But if that's all they're doing and they're not growing, they're not learning, they're not developing, they're not trying to improve themselves, that will wear off on you. And when you start shaping your tribe to be those things that I just listed, your vibe is going to change as well. So invite safe mirrors. Who is mirroring back to you, and what is the image that they're giving back to you? And how is that serving you? Fifth and final practice to soften armor is anchor in your body. What do I mean by that? So emotional availability isn't just talking, it's not cognitive. It's staying in your body when discomfort arises. It's staying connected to how you're feeling, owning it, right? In some cases, sitting with it for a bit. Try breath work, grounding exercises, or just movement instead of numbing or thinking your way out. So the next time you're inclined to overeat, or inclined just to put on Netflix, or inclined just to kind of lose yourself in Xbox or PlayStation or TikTok or doom scrolling. And again, I do all of those in smaller doses and I try to be very intentional. But instead of doing that as a way to numb out, think about getting up and going for a walk, go for a workout, go for a run. And if you want to listen to music, maybe make it music that you could kind of get into a little bit of a trance, a little bit of a flow state, but just let the feeling be there. Whatever the feeling is, inadequacy, insecurity, upset, sadness, just let it kind of sit there and see what comes up and be curious about what comes up. But remember, anchor that in your body. Don't immediately rush to push that away. So let's quickly review the 5 practices to soften armor. Name your defenses, practice micro vulnerability, replace judgment with curiosity, invite safe mirrors, or said another way, create your tribe that fits your vibe, and then anchor in your body. Make sure that you're still feeling and you're very attuned and aware of what's going on in your body through these emotions. All right, let's wrap up here a bit. I appreciate the time. It's a little over 30 minutes, and I appreciate your attention. So if you've relied on armor to survive, number one, you're not broken. You really are brilliant, right? Your armor has allowed you to carry this far. In some ways, it has been a critical piece of how you've gotten this far. Whether you feel you're at the pinnacle of your success or you're still climbing, it has served a purpose. The problem is it can't serve every purpose. It is a tool in the toolbox, but you need other tools that you can go to. And that's why it's really important. And you're not broken. There's a great quote that's attributed to Winston Churchill where he says, listen, we're all broken. That's how the light gets in. So we're not broken. Even when we feel broken, we're not. Something is reemerging. Something is growing. Something is coming out of that broken place. So I'll say this, you don't have to keep earning your safety. So often we feel like we need to keep earning it. We need to keep protecting it. We need to keep controlling it. You don't have to keep proving your worth. And you don't have to go through life so armored that nothing, not even love, can touch you. One of the biggest and saddest things that I see, and I see it all over social media, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and I see it with a lot of the men I coach and a number of the women that I coach, because I coach men and women on relationships and separation and divorce and starting over. I just see this jadedness. And jadedness is just a really layperson's way of saying you've got a shitload of psychological armor that you put on you, and you could barely move in that shit. And I'm not saying you take all the armor off because many of us have been hurt really badly, and that still stings. But what's interesting is the reason we were hurt is we were desiring love. We were desiring deep, soulful connection. And so our answer from getting hurt in our desire for love is to put on this hardcore Teflon iron armor, which does the one thing, it prevents the one thing we're trying to get back to, which is to find that next person that really can give us that soulful, reciprocal, deep love. So again, I'm not saying be reckless with your heart, but if you are looking in the mirror right now and saying, yeah, I am one of those jaded people that has this psychological armor on, you have to ask the question, how is that serving you? And if you just want to be alone for a while and you're in your healing phase, awesome, go for it. No judgment. But if you're at a place where you're really missing that soul connection, even if you meet Mr. Right or Mrs. Right, they're not going to meet you because they're not going to see you through the armor that you're still carrying. So again, you don't have to go through life so armored. You don't have to be packing armor all the time. Keep that in mind. So here's your challenge this week. In one conversation, I want you to pick one conversation, personal or professional. Remove one piece of armor. So to help you remember this, just think one and one. Have one conversation, and in that conversation, remove one piece of armor. Say something real and genuine and authentic, regardless of the consequences. Yes, use your judgment, of course, but just make it real, make it authentic, and see what happens. I think you'd be amazed. Another thing, admit something that's imperfect about you. You're going to be that's one of those micro vulnerabilities. Admit something imperfect. Or third, just pause long enough to be present instead of polished. Try one of these. I think you'll be amazed about two things. What the outcome is in terms of the other person and how they respond to you. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. But even more importantly, I think you'll be surprised that you don't fucking disintegrate. You are tougher than that. You are not a snowflake. You can do any one of these. Say something real, admit something imperfect, or just pause long enough to be present instead of having to be polished. You're going to find that you will not explode. You will not disintegrate. And that's a massive lesson so that you can realize later, I can also take off my armor again and still be okay and still be me. I promise your humanity will take you further than your performance ever will. So if this episode resonated, please subscribe, leave a review, and perhaps most importantly, give me a follow on social media. Again, I'm on all the things: TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. All of it's under the Unstressed Exec. And certainly send this to someone who could use it and who you think might benefit. In our next episode, I'm going to explore the myth of being the strong one and what happens when the person everyone leans on finally breaks. Until then, I'm Dr. George Vergolias, the Unstressed Exec. Thank you for listening. See you next time. And remember, shift happens.